Hello guys, I am Vishnu and today I am presenting a video on electrophysiology of heart. So this is actually a basic topic, especially people who are interested to study about cardiovascular disorders and especially arrhythmia. You have to first know the basics. So today's topic is going to explain you in very short summary. It is going to be a very short summary. The remaining details you can develop on it later by referring other books. So today I will talk to you about different phases of impulse conduction and what are the important features in each phase observed. So this will be useful for you if you are studying about arrhythmias. As you know, arrhythmia means abnormal heart rhythms. So different types of arrhythmias are there. So we will talk about that later. So today our topic is solely based on electrophysiology of heart and the basics. So when we look at the phases of cardiac action potential, it is divided into 5 phases. We have a phase 0, we have a phase 1, we have phase 2, phase 3 and phase 4. And the speciality of each phase is mentioned here. In phase 0, sodium channels are opened. In phase 1, potassium channels are activated or opened. In phase 2, calcium channels are opened. Phase 3, again potassium channels are opened. And in phase 4, the cardiac action potential returns to the resting membrane potential. RMP or resting membrane potential is achieved. So these are the different phases of cardiac action potential. Now you can see clearly phase 0. So actually a diagram, I just took a picture. So just to explain to you, I have mentioned an arrow here. So you can clearly see where phase 0 is happening. So if you look at it clearly, it is written that sodium channels open. So in phase 0, sodium channels are activated or open. It is also known as rapid depolarization phase. So whenever an action potential is generated, first depolarization happens. And at the last stage, the potential or the cardiac action potential returns to the resting membrane potential. So phase 0 is also known as rapid depolarization phase. The resting membrane potential in a myocardial cell is minus 90 millivolts. When sodium channels are open, there is a rapid influx of sodium ions into myocardial cells and depolarization occurs. So as a result of which phase 0 begins. So when sodium channels open, sodium ions enter into myocardial cells and that is the starting phase of depolarization. When we talk about phase 1, sodium channels get blocked or they are inactivated and instead potassium channels open. So there is a practical thing that I want to tell you here. When a patient is suffering from hypertension, we always advise people to reduce their intake of sodium-rich diet because sodium increases hypertension. That is why salt intake is also has to be restricted. But this kind of patients can be advised to increase their intake of potassium. The reason is potassium is an enemy of sodium. So when sodium increases, potassium reduces. So potassium helps to reduce the blood pressure and sodium increases the blood pressure. So that is why a patient with hypertension is usually advised to increase their intake of potassium-rich food. So that can include green leafy vegetables, which are usually potassium-rich. That can also include turmeric, which is rich in potassium, etc. So in phase 0, you saw that the sodium channels are activated. So as a result of which, sodium ions enter into the myocardial cells and depolarization occurs. That happens in phase 0. Now what happens in phase 1? Sodium channels are inactivated. You can see it from the diagram. Sodium channels are inactivated. Potassium channels open. So there is activation or opening of potassium channels. So as a result of which action potential reduces. So you can see it clearly that there is a slight reduction in that graph. So potassium channels have opened, due to which the rapid depolarization that was happening has reduced now. So there is a slight downward deflection of action potential. You can see that from the diagram very clearly, that when sodium channels opened, there was a drastic increase in action potential. And when potassium channels opened, sodium channels got deactivated. So as a result of which, there is a downward deflection. When we talk about phase 2, it is also known as plateau phase. So plateau, I hope you know, you have studied in geography also. Plateau is a very straight surface area. It is not like a hill or a mountain or something which is pointed or uneven. Plateau means it is a parallel surface area. So you can see it in phase 2 very clearly, that there is a straight line. It is neither going up, it is neither going down. So it is a straight line. So that is called phase 2. So in this phase, calcium channels get open. There is actually a role of potassium channel also, but potassium channels have lesser role to play here. Calcium channels have more role to play here. So in this phase, there is inward movement of calcium ions. That means calcium ions enter into the myocardial cells, and there is an outward movement of potassium ions. So this is what happened. This is like an exchange. So calcium goes inside and potassium goes outside. Since there is a balance between inward movement of calcium and outward movement of potassium, this phase is also known as plateau phase. So you can understand that very easily when you go to a shop and you want to get half kg of sugar or something. So on the other side, there will be a weight of 500 gram, and on the other side, there will be 500 gram sugar. So it is, if it is in the balance, then the weighing balance will also show the positive balance. So same thing happens here also, that potassium, the amount of potassium that is going outside the myocardial cell is exactly equal to the amount of calcium ions that is entering into the cell. So LHS is equal to RHS. So as a result of which, this phase is also known as plateau phase. So you can see it from the arrow mark very clearly. Now we come to phase 3. So in this phase, calcium channels completely close, potassium channels still remain open. So due to the above changes, repolarization occurs. So now calcium channels are completely closed. So there is no balance of calcium and potassium here, because calcium channel is closed. So potassium is the dominator here. So due to the above changes, repolarization occurs. When the membrane potential reaches minus 80 to minus 85 millivolt, potassium channels also close. So this happens in phase 3. So this I have explained in very simple terms, because when you are reading in textbooks and all, it will be written in very complicated terms. It's not necessary that everybody needs to understand. So I just explained in simple terms. Then if you want further knowledge, definitely you can refer books and make your knowledge broad. And the last phase, so you can see it in 2 arrows that are mentioned here. They are known as resting membrane potential, RMP. So this is actually associated with diastole. So diastole, I hope you know, we have 2 types of heartbeat. One is the systole and the other is diastole. Systole is known as the contraction phase of the heart, and diastole is known as the relaxation phase of the heart. So phase 4 is also known as resting membrane potential. It is associated with diastole. There are certain myocardial cells which have a potential to undergo spontaneous depolarization. So they generate action potential without any stimulus. So this property is known as automaticity. So first let's go to phase 4 and let's try to understand what happens in phase 4. In phase 4, what happens? All the depolarization, repolarization, all these things that happen completely gets neutralized, and the myocardial cell returns to the resting membrane potential. So this is what happens in phase 4. So this is usually associated with diastole, because you know that diastole is the relaxation phase of the heartbeat. But there are certain myocardial cells in our body. They have a tendency to automatically get depolarized and then automatically return to resting membrane potential. And again, this thing goes on and on and on. Because this is very important. Because if there is a systole and a diastole, and after that, if the heartbeat stops, then definitely you know what will happen. So there are certain myocardial cells in our body which reactivates the same. So an example of that is sinoatrial node. So sinoatrial node is a part of the heart which generates action potential, and atrioventricular node, AV node, is the part of the heart which propagates or continues the generated action potential. So like for example, you are starting a particular business which has become very famous, and then after you pass away or after you retire from that business, your children or whoever your successors are, they are carrying on that business. So same thing is happening here also. Sinoatrial node is the trigger point for generating action potential, and once it is generated, it is propagated through all parts of the heart by the atrioventricular node. So when we will study about antiarrhythmic drugs, when we will study about different problems of arrhythmia, we will be focusing mainly on sinoatrial node and atrioventricular node. These are the main points of focus. There are other points of focus, but this will be the main points of focus. So that is why I always tell people that we should know the basics of our body first. Unless and until you understand your body properly, you will not be able to understand what are the impact of different diseases on our body and what are the effects of different drugs on our body. So spontaneous depolarization, always remember the meaning of spontaneous means something that happens on its own without any encouragement from outside. If you are doing something on your own without anybody telling you to do it, it is spontaneous. So spontaneous depolarization is the fastest in sinoatrial node, and hence it is also known as pacemaker. So I hope you know what a pacemaker is. An artificial pacemaker is also implanted in patients due to this reason. So from the sinoatrial node, the electrical activity begins. Electrical activity means what I told till now. Phase 0, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, all these things begins from the sinoatrial node. And the continuation of this electrical activity is maintained by the atrioventricular node or AV node. So from sinoatrial node, the electrical activity begins and it propagates to the rest of the heart. So this is just a summary of the electrophysiology of heart. I will just tell it to you in a very short summary once again. So we have 5 phases. So the phase 0, what happens? The sodium channels get open. So when the sodium channels get open, that means the sinoatrial node is getting active. So the sodium channels get open means sodium ions enter into the myocardial cells. So as a result of which, it causes rapid depolarization. In phase 1, what happens is sodium channels get closed and potassium channels get opened. And both of them are enemies, as I said before. So what happens? There is a deflection in the action potential when you see in the graph. In phase 2, what happens is potassium channels are going from inside to outside. That means from inside the myocardial cells, potassium cells go outside, and from outside, calcium cells enter inside the myocardial cells. So since there is a balance between the amount of potassium going from inside to outside and the amount of calcium going from outside to inside, it is also known as Plateau phase. So there will be a straight line. And in phase 3, what happens is calcium channels get closed and potassium channels get opened, and means it is already activated and it is continuing. So due to this imbalance, again, repolarization happens. So which is exactly opposite to that of sodium. In sodium condition, depolarization happens, and in potassium condition, repolarization happens. And then definitely there is a downward deflection of the action potential. And in phase 4, what happens? the myocardial cell returns to the resting membrane potential. But there are certain myocardial cells in our body which have the capacity to automatically generate action potential without any trigger. So that property is known as automaticity, and that is shown by the sinoatrial node. So the sinoatrial node, it is also known as pacemaker. It has a tendency to automatically generate its action potential, and the same action potential is distributed to the all parts of the heart by the atrioventricular node or AV node. So that's it for the presentation today. This is just a very small basics. I hope anybody who watches this video will understand how electrical activity gets generated and propagated in our heart. I have said in very simple terms, and the remaining details you can get from books. So please do like, share, and subscribe if you feel relevant, because we will be sharing more practical knowledge. We will be sharing, there are a lot of topics that we wish to talk about. So please support us in our process. If you want me to discuss or present on any topic, anything related to pharmacology, therapeutics, toxicology, laboratory values, etc., you may feel free to let us know. We will definitely work on that and share more educative presentations. So that's it for today. All of you, I hope you have a nice day and a nice studying and learning time ahead. Thank you so much. Bye.